Boy disappeared on his way home from soccer practice. Years later, his DNA is found in a routine hospital test under a different name. Before we dive in, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your support helps us create more deep and gripping stories just for you. There's more to come. The air smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves. Late October in Ashford, a modest suburban town nestled between two low ridges in New Hampshire, mint copper-red trees, dusk before dinner, and the familiar rhythm of school, soccer, and homework. Nothing ever really happened here. Not yet. 10-year-old Liam Harper jogged down Meadow Lane, his cleats tapping lightly against the damp pavement. The shadows of oak branches fell long and crooked across the road as the sun sank behind the hills. His backpack bounced on one shoulder, half-zipped, trailing a corner of a textbook and an empty Gatorade bottle. His practice jersey clung to him, still damp with sweat, the number 7 fading from too many washes. He never made a home. 6:14 p.m. Kate Harper glanced at the clock again. Her husband, Tom, was already pacing the kitchen, the spaghetti boiling over as he muttered about calling the coach. Liam was usually home by 6. Always was. Maybe Ben had picked him up, but Ben was with friends. Maybe Liam stopped by the store. He never did without asking. They called his name up and down the street. Then they called his teammates. Then the coach. At 6:42, Tom dialed 911. 7:35 p.m. By the time the sun fully disappeared, Ashford PD had cordoned off Meadow Lane. Flashlights blinked through bushes and hedges. Volunteers gathered by the soccer field with search dogs and thermal scopes. Helicopters circled once, then again, spilling white light over empty roads and rustling leaves. Detective Laura Myers, mid-40s, steady and meticulous, took the case personally. "A kid doesn't just vanish between here and 5 blocks down," she said to the press. "Someone knows something." Kate was hysterical. Tom held it in barely. Ben, 14, sat on the curb, hugging his knees. He kept whispering. He was just walking home. The first week, posters went up on every pole and storefront in town. The local paper ran his school photo on the front page 3 days in a row. National outlets picked up the story. Boy vanishes in broad daylight. Anonymous tips flooded the police line. Psychic hotlines, late-night callers, vague sightings. Nothing solid. A child's cleat was found near the woods behind the train tracks. Not Liam's. 3 months later, the town began to settle again, if uneasily. Liam's bedroom was kept exactly as it had been. Clothes folded on the chair, soccer medals still swinging from the bedpost. Kate refused to move anything. Tom started sleeping on the couch. Ben stopped going to soccer altogether. The investigation stalled. Theories faded. Rumors lived longer than facts. Detective Myers never closed the file. 15 years later, in a brightly lit hospital in downtown Manchester, a nurse snapped the cap off a DNA swab. The patient, a quiet 25-year-old man with surgical tape across his ribs, winced as she brushed the inside of his cheek. 3 days later, an automatic alert lit up the screen in the state DNA database. Partial familial match to missing person case, hashtag 2003-176A, Liam Harper. The name on the chart read, Ethan Rains. And he had no memory of his life before the age of 10. Anna Collins leaned back in her rolling chair, stretching her stiff neck as the late afternoon light filtered through the glass panels of Manchester General Hospital's outpatient wing. It was Tuesday, and she had already swabbed 6 patients for the new statewide genetic health registry, a pilot initiative aimed at identifying hereditary conditions early. Mostly elderly patients, a few expectant mothers, and now, a quiet man recovering from a collapsed lung. She clicked on the next chart. Rains, Ethan. Age, 25. No known family history. Emergency contact, adoptive mother, Marjorie Rains. Nothing unusual. Anna stood, gloved up, and entered room 214. Ethan sat upright on the hospital bed, pale but alert, his dark hair flattened against the pillow. There was something about his expression, distant but watchful, as if he was always listening for something no one else could hear. "Hi, I'm Anna," she said, gently cheerful. "I just need to do a quick DNA swab, part of our new records update. Takes less than a minute." He nodded silently. No questions, no complaints. He opened his mouth when she lifted the swab. One clean sweep inside each cheek. "Thanks," she said, labeling the vial. "That's it." "Cool," he muttered, glancing back toward the window. 3 days later, the alert came during Anna's shift change. She had stayed behind to finish charting when the automated red notification popped up in the genetic database. Flagged. Partial familial match. Reference. Case hashtag 2003-176A. Status. Unresolved. Missing child. Suggested action. Review and notify supervisor. Anna's breath caught. She clicked the reference number and skimmed the linked case. Liam Harper, age 10, vanished October 2003 while walking home from soccer practice in Ashford. Cold case. National attention. No resolution. Her eyes darted back to Ethan's profile. The DNA match wasn't definitive, not a direct ID, but it was a strong familial match, flagged as possible sibling or self with incomplete record. She reread the summary 3 times. No known genetic relatives on file. No records before 2010. Adopted at approximately age 10. Her heart pounded. It was impossible. Coincidence? A lab error? She picked up her phone, hovered over her supervisor's contact. Protocol was clear. All flagged familial DNA alerts must be escalated. But she hesitated. Anna wasn't a detective. She had seen dozens of patients, heard dozens of life stories that didn't add up. Trauma, amnesia, foster care. Not every mystery had a neat ending. And still, something about Ethan's face had stayed with her. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, Anna sat in her small apartment, laptop glowing in the dark. She pulled up every article she could find on Liam Harper, archived local news, forums, Reddit threads still active after all these years. Photos of a boy with a wide smile and crooked teeth. Flyers yellowed with age. The timelines matched. Liam disappeared at 10. Ethan was found around 10. The next morning, Anna walked into the hospital early. She didn't stop by the nurse's station. She went straight to her supervisor's office and knocked. "Morning," said Jared Mitchell, glancing up from his screen. "You were in early." Anna placed a printed copy of the alert on his desk. "We got a hit," she said quietly. He looked at it, then back at her. "You already read it." I did," she admitted. "And I think it might be real." Jared studied her face. "I'll contact the authorities. You've done your part." Anna nodded, but something in her chest wouldn't let go. A flicker of intuition. Not everything felt finished. Not by a long shot. The Harper house on Brookside Lane hadn't changed in 15 years. The shutters still needed painting. The porch light still buzzed faintly when turned on. But inside, time had burrowed deep. Not in dust or decay, but in the quiet, brittle way grief settles into the walls. Kate Harper stood at the kitchen window, fingers curled around a chipped coffee mug, watching 2 crows peck at the frost-silvered lawn. The coffee had gone cold. She hadn't realized how long she'd been staring out. It happened like that sometimes, the blank stares, the slip time, the way her body moved, but her mind stayed caught in that evening in October. Her husband, Tom, came in from the garage, wiping oil-stained hands on a rag. They barely looked at each other anymore. There was a time when they'd talk about everything. What Liam said at breakfast, what Ben had written in English class. Now, most of their words were functional, stripped of color. "Car's fixed," Tom muttered. "Just needed a new fuse." Kate nodded. "Good." Silence. The worst part wasn't the day Liam vanished. It was the weeks after. The search parties turning up nothing but empty fields and broken branches. The media tents that clustered near the park, then vanished when the story grew cold. The whispers in the grocery store. The hollow promises from cops and reporters. Ben, 14 at the time, had crumbled slowly. Guilt oozed into him like water into drywall. He was supposed to walk Liam home that day, but he'd stayed late with friends, sneaking sodas behind the school gym. He said he forgot. Kate never said the words, never blamed him aloud. But silence can accuse more sharply than speech. Their marriage cracked that winter. Tom started drinking. Kate stopped eating. They both went to therapy, separately. Together didn't work anymore. Ben left at 17. Didn't say goodbye. Just vanished, like Liam, but by choice. They hadn't seen him in 7 years. Kate's phone rang at 8:13 a.m. Unknown number. She nearly let it go to voicemail, but something in her chest tightened. An old reflex, sharpened over years of false alarms. "Hello, Mrs. Harper." A woman's voice, even professional. "This is Detective Laura Myers with the Ashford Police Department." Kate's legs went cold. She sank into the nearest chair. "Yes," she said, barely a whisper. "I understand this is sudden, but I need to speak with you about a recent development in your son Liam's case." Kate couldn't speak. The silence stretched so long the detective gently said, "Are you still there?" "Ah, yes." "What happened?" "There was a DNA alert triggered by a hospital system in Manchester. It's not conclusive, but it's a familial match. Close. Possibly Liam. Or someone related." Kate pressed the mug to her lips, hands trembling. "I'll come in," she said. "Today. Just tell me what I need to do." When she hung up, she sat for a long time in the kitchen, staring at the table. Then she stood and opened the hallway closet, reached behind the coats, pulled out the shoebox she hadn't touched in years. Inside were Liam's drawings, a tooth in a plastic bag, his blue watch, the one that stopped at 6:17 p.m. on October 14th, 2003. She clutched it to her chest. Tom came in, noticed the open box. Kate looked up at him. Really looked, for the first time in months. "They think they found him." Tom didn't move, didn't speak. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and latex. Ethan Rain sat on the edge of the hospital bed, shirtless, surgical gauze crisscrossing his ribs like makeshift armor. He was skimming an old paperback, something sci-fi and yellowed at the edges, but his eyes weren't following the words. He couldn't shake the dream. The boy had muddy sneakers and a red soccer jersey. He ran through a corridor that smelled of earth and steel. Behind him, shadows. Voices. The boy turned, called out something Ethan never remembered when he woke up. That boy always had his face. "Ethan." Anna stood in the doorway, file in hand. He looked up, startled. "Oh, hey. I just wanted to check on your recovery," she said with a gentle smile. But her voice had a tautness she couldn't mask. "Any pain?" "Not really. Just sore." He paused. "You okay?" Anna nodded too quickly. "I'm fine. Just had a long day." She sat on the chair beside his bed, setting the file on her lap. She hadn't meant to come in. There was no medical reason to. But something had been gnawing at her since the alert came in. "I have a question," she said. "It's personal. You don't have to answer if you don't want to." Ethan tilted his head. "All right. Do you remember anything from before you were 10? He blinked slowly, like someone asked what color air was. "No," he said after a beat. "Not really. Just flashes. Sometimes dreams, I guess. But nothing solid." "Do you know how you were adopted?" He looked at the window, then back. "They told me I was found in a house during a police raid. Some kind of trafficking thing. They didn't say much else. I was quiet. They said I barely spoke for weeks. Then I just started going by Ethan." "Who named you?" "My mom. Well, my adoptive mom. Marjorie. She said I didn't remember my name. She picked one she thought sounded strong." Anna swallowed hard. She'd read the adoption file. Sparse, inconsistent. A few court-sealed documents. A therapist's note. Subject appears disassociated from early childhood, potentially trauma-induced. Patient resists regression. A boy with no history. Found in a place no one wanted to talk about. And now a familial DNA match to a child who vanished 15 years ago. Anna stood abruptly. "Thank you. I'm sorry, I needed to ask." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Is something wrong?" She forced a smile. "No. I'll check in again tomorrow." Down the hall, Anna found a quiet corner and sat, phone in her lap, thoughts tangled and urgent. What if it's him? But it couldn't be that simple. DNA matched only partially, not definitive. But the timeline fit. Ethan's age, the gap in his history, the trauma, the dissociation, all of it whispered a deeper truth. Anna had seen grief. She'd worked pediatrics, had watched parents bury children. But this, a life torn in half and sewn back under a false name, it rattled her. And for reasons she didn't understand, she felt responsible. Maybe because she was the one who swabbed him. Maybe because she had looked him in the eye when he was still just a chart in a quiet room. Or maybe because, deep down, she knew what it was to have unanswered questions about the past. She texted her supervisor, still reviewing patient history. "We'll follow up on protocol." But in truth, Anna wasn't following protocol anymore. She was following a feeling. Anna sat in her parked car outside the hospital, fingers tapping restlessly on the steering wheel. Her shift had ended an hour ago, but her thoughts refused to clock out. She knew she should let it go. The file was officially passed on to the authorities. She had done her part. That was the end of her involvement. But it didn't feel like the end. She stared down at her phone, rereading the case summary. Ethan Rains. No prior medical history before age 10. Adopted. Limited documentation. Every line whispered something wasn't right. Something was missing, not just in the records, but in the spaces between Ethan's calm words and distant gaze. Anna had always prided herself on following rules. But sometimes, she thought, the rules weren't written for cases like this. That night, she booted up her laptop and opened 3 tabs: the State Health Record Portal, LinkedIn, and public adoption registries. It didn't take long to find Marjorie Rains. A well-groomed profile photo, graying auburn hair, a pearl necklace, a professional smile. Marjorie Rains, LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. Retired, based in Keene, New Hampshire. No children listed in her bio. No photos with Ethan. Just clean credentials, glowing recommendations, and 3 decades of spotless service with child trauma patients. A chill ran down Anna's spine. She copied the address from an old professional listing and pasted it into a satellite view. A modest single-family home on a tree-lined street. Garden well-kept. Porch swing. American flag. Too normal. In the state archives, Anna found the court summary from Ethan's adoption. Most of it was redacted, but the intake summary included one chilling phrase. Minor located during law enforcement operation related to unlicensed shelter. No parents or guardians located. Custody transferred to temporary foster care. Finalized adoption within 10 months. No parents. No guardians. No efforts to track biological family. That was not standard. She leaned back, tension rising. The next morning, Anna called the number listed under Marjorie's licensing records. A landline. The phone rang 4 times before a soft, calm voice answered. Hello. Hi. Is this Marjorie Rains? Yes. Speaking. This is Anna Collins. I'm a nurse at Manchester General. I was recently in contact with your son, Ethan, after his procedure. He's doing well. Oh, that's good to hear, Marjorie replied. He told me about the surgery. It was minor, right? Yes, just a chest tube for a spontaneous pneumothorax. He's recovering fine. I just had a couple of administrative questions. About his early records. A pause. I'm not sure what you mean. His file should be complete through his pediatrician. Yes, of course, Anna said quickly. I just wondered if you knew anything more about where he was before the adoption. For continuity of care. Marjorie's voice grew more cautious. I'm afraid there's very little to share. Ethan had no memory of where he came from. The authorities told me he was likely trafficked or abandoned. They gave me no identifying details. I was just grateful to give him a stable home. Anna hesitated. Do you remember the name of the shelter he was rescued from? Another pause. I'm sorry, Marjorie said. It was a very long time ago. I don't remember. But she was lying. Anna could hear it. Not just in the words, but in what wasn't being said, in the flatness of tone. The way the answer came just a second too late. Thank you, Anna said, politely ending the call. But her stomach churned. That night, Anna stood in her apartment kitchen, kettle hissing softly. She stared out the window into the dark, the reflection of her own troubled face ghost-like in the glass. Marjorie was hiding something. The adoption didn't add up. The missing childhood, the DNA alert, and Ethan himself, so calm, so emotionally muted, like he'd been trained to forget. Anna took her tea and opened a new document on her laptop. She titled it, Ethan Rains /case #2003-176A notes. She wasn't letting this go. Ben Harper didn't believe in closure. It was just a word people used to mask grief with bureaucracy. At 24, he'd built a modest but sharp-edged career as an independent journalist, writing exposés for online magazines with a bite. Human trafficking rings in Vermont, corrupt foster agencies, missing person cases that the police had let rot. He didn't cover Liam's case, ever. That was the one story he didn't touch. He still remembered the exact shade of light that October evening. The sound of cleats on pavement. The way Liam had looked up at him when he said, I'll meet you at home. And Ben, too eager to sneak off with his friends behind the school, had waved his little brother off with a distracted nod. He never saw him again. Ben's apartment was a third-floor walk-up above a Thai restaurant in downtown Ashford. He was halfway through editing a piece on illegal private adoption networks when the knock came. He opened the door to find a woman, late 20s, brown curls tied back, scrubs under a denim jacket. Clear-eyed but tired. "You're Ben Harper?" He stiffened. "Depends. I'm Anna Collins. I work at Manchester General. I think I found your brother." Ben didn't speak. He just stared. Anna handed him a printout, a screenshot of the DNA match alert. Underneath, a photocopied hospital chart. Ethan Rains. "This was flagged during a routine DNA swab," she explained. "He's 25. No memory before age 10. Adopted under vague circumstances. His DNA matches Liam's, either directly or as a sibling. It's not conclusive, but," she paused, "I've looked into the adoptive mother. Her story doesn't hold up." Ben let the silence stretch too long. Then, finally, "You expect me to believe that after 15 years, some nurse just stumbles on my brother in a hospital bed?" "I didn't stumble," Anna said quietly. "I followed a gut feeling. One that hasn't gone away." Ben crossed his arms. "You should have gone to the police." "I did," she said, "but they moved slow. I thought maybe you'd want to know faster." He hesitated. His instincts said to shut the door. But the name, Ethan Rains, had already taken root in his brain like a splinter. "What do you want from me?" "I want the truth," she said. "And I think you do too." 2 days later, Ben walked into Manchester General Hospital under a fake name. Chris Mendez, freelance reporter. He'd called ahead, scheduled a friendly interview with Ethan Rains about the patient experience. Ethan didn't recognize him. Of course he didn't. Ben studied him with a quiet hunger. The way he scratched his wrist when nervous, the slant of his jaw, the faint scar under his chin. All of it so eerily familiar. "So, Ethan," Ben asked, voice smooth, "any childhood memories?" Ethan shrugged. "Nothing useful. Just scraps. Mostly blank before 10. Kind of like starting mid-movie. No family before adoption. Not that I remember." Ben noticed the way Ethan's eyes darkened for a half-second at the word family. Not defensiveness. Something heavier. "You ever wonder where you came from?" Ben asked. Ethan hesitated. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Sometimes. But wondering never really got me anywhere." "Maybe it will now," Ben said, forcing a smile. "You ever heard of a boy named Liam Harper?" Ethan froze. Just for a second. But it was there. "No," he said. Too flat. Too quick. Ben walked out of the hospital and didn't stop until he reached his car. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. It was him. It had to be. But he wasn't sure what terrified him more, the idea that Liam was alive, or the possibility that after all this time, his brother didn't remember him. Or worse, didn't want to. Back at his apartment, Anna was waiting. "Well," she asked. Ben stared at her. "He looks just like our dad." Ethan Rains had always known there was something wrong with his memories. Not just the gaps. He'd accepted long ago that not everyone remembered their early childhood. But for him, there was nothing. No first day of school. No scraped knees. No birthdays or bedtime stories. Just a hard wall of darkness that stopped at age 10. And then, suddenly, a quiet house with lavender wallpaper, a soft-spoken woman named Marjorie, and the strange sensation that he'd arrived in someone else's life. He never said any of this aloud. Instead, Ethan grew into silence. He liked solitary things. Long runs through backwoods trails, working with his hands, fixing up old radios and restoring beat-up typewriters. There was something calming in coaxing broken things back into function. He didn't mind being alone. He preferred it, most days. But the dreams wouldn't stop. They came once or twice a week, more since the hospital stay. Always the same fragments, never quite linear. A green soccer jersey drying on a chain-link fence. A backpack swinging from one shoulder, too light. A narrow hallway with peeling paint and a dripping faucet. A child's voice yelling a name that always slipped through his grasp. And the most haunting, a kitchen table, sunlight pouring through lace curtains, a woman's hand gently brushing crumbs into her palm. In the dream, Ethan always knew this place. But the moment he reached for a face, a name, it shattered into pieces, and he woke up with a sick emptiness in his chest. He bought a notebook at a gas station on the way home from the hospital. Nothing fancy, just lined pages and a stiff black cover. He wasn't a writer. but he had to put it somewhere. The feelings. The flashes. October 3 to 2:42 a.m. Dream again. Soccer ball in a ditch. Someone calling Liam. Not me. Or was it? October 6th. Can't sleep. Picture of a woman's face in my head. Not Marjorie. Blonde, tired eyes. Kind. Heard her whisper, my boy. Woke up crying. October 9th. I think I used to draw. I don't remember what. But my hand remembers the motion. The notebook slowly filled with fragments. Bits of dreams, strange instincts, places he swore he'd never seen but somehow knew. A rusted overpass with ivy, a field behind a schoolyard with a broken swing set. He began sketching them. The lines came quickly, as if his hand moved before he understood. Each night, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, lit by a single lamp, and tried to reverse engineer a past from shadows. He noticed it first at the coffee shop. A man, early 30s, scruffy, wiry, ordered a black coffee and sat too close, never touched his cup. Just watched Ethan. Then again at the grocery store. A glimpse of that same face near the parking lot, ducking behind a silver truck. Ethan told himself he was being paranoid, but the unease took root. At night, he double-checked the locks, left lights on, and then the name came back. He woke up gasping, heart pounding, the notebook open on the bed beside him. Ben. It hit like a tremor through his ribs. He didn't know who Ben was, but the name was real, familiar. It came with a voice, cracked and young, calling through wind and distance. He flipped through the pages and circled the name. Underline it twice. He stared at it until dawn. Ben Harper sat cross-legged on the floor of his cluttered apartment. Papers and manila folders fanned out around him like the wings of some grim, bureaucratic bird. His laptop glowed beside a half-empty bottle of whiskey, tabs open to adoption laws, NGO registries, and satellite images. He'd traced Ethan's adoption back to 2010, finalized by Marjorie Rains under emergency custodial privilege, citing an at-risk minor recovered from a private shelter during an interstate sting. But the records hit a wall at the same place, again and again. The shelter's name, Hope Ridge Initiative, led nowhere. No IRS filings. No operating license. No media coverage. No digital footprint past 2011. Ben muttered to himself. A non-existent charity adopts out a traumatized 10-year-old and vanishes? That's not just sloppy. That's surgical. Then he found something strange. On an archived local news blog, a photo from 2010, taken after the supposed raid on the shelter. It showed a boy, face blurred, being led by police into a van. Behind him stood a woman in a gray coat, Marjorie, and in the background, partially obscured, a building. A windowless structure with a rusted red door and a faded sign that read, Weller and Sons Logistics. A warehouse. Ben screenshotted it, tracked down the address. Keene, New Hampshire, 10 minutes from Marjorie's home. He texted Anna. Found the building. It's still standing. Want to go digging? Anna had spent the morning sipping lukewarm coffee across from Marjorie Rains, in a perfectly arranged living room that smelled like cinnamon and starch. Marjorie had offered her lemon tea. Her voice was gentle, her posture impeccable, a woman accustomed to control. But the smile never quite touched her eyes. I've told you, Marjorie said, folding her hands in her lap. I was approached after the raid by a social worker from a small rescue effort. They call themselves Hope Ridge. They said Ethan had been through trauma. He needed a home. Anna studied her. What kind of trauma? They didn't say. Marjorie looked away. And to be honest, I didn't ask too many questions. He was a quiet boy. I thought I could help him rebuild. Why would the agency not file formal paperwork until months later? I assumed it was bureaucratic delay. You're a licensed social worker. That didn't strike you as unusual. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. Are you accusing me of something, Miss Collins? Anna didn't flinch. No, I'm just trying to understand how a 10-year-old boy with no records, no name, and no family ended up with a new identity, and no one thought to trace his past. Marjorie stood abruptly. I think this conversation is over. But Anna had seen enough. The tremble in the teacup, the tightened jaw. She was hiding something. That evening, Anna and Ben met outside the crumbling shell of Weller and Sons Logistics, the sun bleeding behind it like a dying ember. The building had clearly been abandoned for years, windows boarded, vines coiled up the walls, The lock on the side door rusted and split. "This place hasn't seen a shipment since 2009, Ben muttered, pushing the door open with his shoulder. And yet somehow, a child came out of it with a new name and no past. Inside, the air was stale and thick with mildew. Dust blanketed broken crates and rusted shelves. Anna's flashlight beam darted across graffiti-stained walls and cracked tiles. In a back office, they found metal filing cabinets, their drawers warped but not sealed. One broke open with a screech, revealing old intake logs and faded notes. Most were water-damaged, but some had names scrawled hastily, first names only. Anna pulled out a bent photo from the back of the drawer. It showed 6 children standing in a row, backs to the camera. In the corner, a handwritten date, October 12, 2003, 2 days before Liam disappeared. And on the back, an address neither of them recognized, written in red ink, almost like a warning. Ben held the photo with trembling fingers. "He was here," he whispered. "Liam." The deeper they moved into the gutted interior of the Weller and Sons warehouse, the more the silence thickened. Their footsteps echoed across cracked concrete and under the sagging remnants of an office mezzanine. The smell of rot clung to the air, mingling with scorched insulation and something older, like mildew, metal, and forgotten grief. Anna's flashlight flickered, casting jittery shadows across rusted desks and moldy filing cabinets. Ben walked ahead with a crowbar, his jaw tight, every muscle wired. They were no longer following a trail. They were walking inside the wound. In the back of the warehouse, behind what used to be a loading dock, they found a door half torn from its hinges. Beyond it, a smaller room, fire-scarred and half-collapsed, the smell of soot still lingering. "Someone torched this place," Ben said under his breath. Anna stepped carefully across the charred floor. She spotted what looked like a metal lockbox melted into the wall. Nearby, scorched photos littered the floor, some only partially destroyed. She picked one up with trembling fingers. It was a blurry image of a boy, no older than 10, sitting at a table with a plastic tray of food. His face was turned away, but the shape of his jaw, the angle of his ear. "I think it's Liam," she whispered. Ben knelt beside her, jaw clenched. And then, something unexpected, tucked inside a rusted drawer, wrapped in melted cling film, a set of mini DV surveillance tapes. Ben held them like they were fragile bones. Old security footage. Late 90s, early 2000s. "They might still work," Anna said, voice shaking. And beside the drawer, a binder. Heavy, cracked at the spine but intact. Inside, child profiles. Ages, behavior summaries, notes on compliance. No full names, just code identifiers. Subject, at 21. Male. Resistant. Requires sedation. Dates spanning multiple years. Each page bore a distinct watermark, a circle intersected by 2 vertical lines, etched faintly like a signature. Anna froze. "I've seen that before," she whispered. It was on the corner of the page in Ethan's intake file. "I thought it was a hospital stamp." Ben's eyes narrowed. "It's not." The symbol matched several references Ben had uncovered during past investigations into off-grid shelters and defunct rescue organizations. He'd always thought they were unconnected anomalies, redacted footnotes in abuse scandals, broken links in adoption databases. But here it was, repeating itself again and again. A covert network, hiding in plain sight, masked as protection, selling invisibility for a price. Children who vanished weren't always lost. Some were rebranded. They hadn't just found Liam's past. They had stumbled into the machine that erased it. Anna dropped to her knees. The notebook she carried fell from her coat, pages spilling across the blackened floor. In the flashlight's trembling beam, her hand covered her mouth as she tried to breathe through the rising tide of horror. "He was here," she choked. "They put him in a system. They numbered him. Like livestock." Ben crouched beside her, eyes fierce and distant. "I'm going to bring it down," he said. "Every name. Every fake charity. Every person who turned a blind eye." Anna looked at him, eyes wet. "But what if Ethan doesn't want to know?" "Doesn't matter," Ben said. "He deserves to, and so do the others." Outside, the wind howled through shattered windows. The world doesn't change all at once. It fractures in quiet moments. For Ethan, it happened in a sterile conference room at Manchester General, where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the hum of a water cooler marked time. Detective Laura Myers sat across from him, her voice calm but firm. Ben sat beside her, silent, arms crossed. Anna lingered near the door, uncertain whether she was a guest, an intruder, or a thread binding them all. "We'd like to do a second DNA test," Myers said. "A conclusive one. This would be a full sibling match against Ben Harper." Ethan nodded slowly. "I already gave a sample once. That flagged a partial match. Enough to reopen the case, but not to confirm identity. This would be definitive." He looked at Ben. The same jawline, the same eyebrows. He hadn't wanted to see it at first. Now, it was impossible to unsee. "All right," Ethan said. "Do it." The results came in quietly, tucked inside an unassuming manila envelope delivered by a courier who didn't know he was holding someone's identity in his hands. Full sibling match, 99.997%. Ethan Raines was, beyond any doubt, Liam Harper. News spreads fast, especially when it brings an ending to a story that once held a nation in breathless suspense. Local press got the scoop first. Then national networks picked it up within hours. Breakthrough in 15-year-old cold case. Missing boy found living under new and AME DNA confirms identity of Liam Harper. Photos of a smiling 10-year-old in a soccer jersey were paired with blurry hospital hallway shots of Ethan. Social media exploded. Threads trended. The Harper family's doorbell didn't stop ringing. Reporters camped on lawns. Neighbors whispered. And Ethan, now Liam again, at least in headlines, sat on the edge of his bed staring at the TV screen with his own face beneath the word found. He didn't feel found. He felt violently unmoored. The next morning, he drove to Marjorie's house. She opened the door in a cardigan and slacks, trying to smile, that careful smile that once calmed his worst nights. But now, it only made him feel caged. "I saw the news," she said softly. "You knew," Ethan said, voice shaking. "I didn't. You knew I had a life before you. You knew I didn't belong to you. And you let me believe I was no one." Marjorie's eyes welled. "I didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you everything. They said you were traumatized. They said you needed to start over. You were so quiet, so afraid. You didn't speak for weeks. When I asked if you remembered your name, you just cried. You told me I was rescued. You told me no one came looking for me. They didn't know where to look," she whispered. "You were safe. That's all I wanted. You made me forget who I was." "No," Marjorie said, tears slipping down her cheek. "They did. I just tried to give you something to hold on to." Ethan turned away. He didn't know whether to scream, collapse, or thank her for keeping him alive. "Why didn't you ask more questions?" he said, quieter now. "Why didn't you wonder who I used to be?" "I did," she said. "Every day. But I was afraid of the answer." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor with his notebook, flipping through the pages, circling fragments. He stared at a sketch of a field behind a chain-link fence and finally remembered the smell: mud and sun-warmed plastic cones. A soccer ball, a boy calling after him. Ben. Memories were coming back like thunder, not all at once, but fast, loud, and disorienting. And in the storm of it, one truth held still. He had been taken, and now he had to decide who he would be, now that he'd been given back. The Harper home hadn't changed much, at least not on the surface. Same green shutters, same creaking porch, same wind chimes that used to lull Liam to sleep as a child. But when Liam, he reminded himself, stood at the threshold for the first time in 15 years, it didn't feel like coming home. It felt like stepping into someone else's memory. Kate Harper opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes were red, makeup smudged, a dish towel still clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She stared at him, as if afraid he might vanish again if she blinked. "Liam," she whispered. He wanted to say something, anything, but the name didn't fit in his mouth. So he simply nodded. Then Tom appeared behind her, stiffer, more restrained. His face was lined with years of tension and unshed grief. His handshake was firm, too formal for a father greeting a lost son. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. On the living room wall, Liam's childhood photos still hung in perfect symmetry. Kate had kept everything: the school portraits, the team shots, the candid ones with crooked grins. Ethan felt like a stranger visiting a shrine built for someone who looked like him, but had lived a different life. They sat in silence for long minutes. Kate finally broke it with a trembling voice. Do you remember anything? Pieces, Ethan said. Mostly dreams. Sounds. A few flashes. Not enough to make a picture. Tom gave a sad nod. You used to draw. You were always sketching animals, people, buildings. Always so detailed. Ethan flinched. I still draw. I didn't know why. Kate reached for his hand. Her grip was light, tentative. You love peanut butter and honey sandwiches. You hated loud music. You cried the first time you saw a deer hit by a car. He didn't know what to do with that. Those truths belonging to another version of himself. I don't know how to be who you remember, he said quietly. Kate's eyes filled. We don't expect you to be. We just want to know you're still in there somewhere. Ben arrived later, uninvited but expected. He walked in without knocking, his steps hesitant. The sight of Ethan, the grown version of his lost brother, hit him like a second disappearance. He stood there, motionless, eyes glassy. Ethan didn't rise. He stared back, lips tight. So, Ben said at last, you're here. Apparently. I wasn't sure you'd come. Neither was I. Ben sat on the edge of the couch, his legs jittering. I should have walked you home that day. I was supposed to. I was 15 minutes late. 15 goddamn minutes. You think I haven't gone over that day 1,000 times? Ethan snapped. You think I haven't wondered how I ended up where I did? Because someone looked away for too long. Ben's jaw clenched. I was 14. I was a stupid kid. So was I, Ethan said. And I paid for it. Kate stood quickly. That's enough, she said sharply, her voice trembling. Silence returned like a door slamming shut. Later, as twilight crept through the windows, Ethan stood alone in what used to be his bedroom. The walls were pale blue. A bookshelf still held Captain Underpants and Harry Potter. A soccer ball, dusty and deflated, sat in the corner like it had waited the entire time. He touched the dresser top, the height markings still carved in faint pencil notches. One of them read Liam, age 10. He closed his eyes and felt a strange pressure behind them. Something like grief. Something like a memory trying to claw its way out. But it didn't come. That night, back in his apartment, he looked at himself in the mirror for a long time. He saw Ethan, the name that had shaped him, shielded him, lied to him. And beneath that, fragments of Liam. A boy erased. A life stolen. A brother's voice calling his name through the trees. He didn't know who he was yet, but he was going to find out. The truth, Anna had come to realize, was rarely found in one place. It was scattered, buried in files, buried in people. You had to pry it out, one reluctant shard at a time, and she was done waiting for others to do it. She took a week off work, diving headfirst into records, archives, and dusty corners of the internet where most people were too afraid to look. Ben helped, feeding her old leads, digital breadcrumbs he'd gathered in his own years chasing shadows. But the final key came from a simple piece of overlooked paperwork. It was a Foster intake summary, filed under an alias for subject A21 in the Hope Bridge Initiative's brief operational window. Most of it was standard, false names, vague references. But the intake officer's name, handwritten at the bottom in fading ink, made Anna's breath catch. Gregory Fulton. She recognized it immediately. Uncle Greg. He'd been mentioned by Kate in a taped interview years ago. A trusted family friend, former coach, and regular presence in the Harpers' lives during Liam's childhood. He even helped with neighborhood watch patrols during the search. Anna pulled the Harpers' old address book from the original case file. Gregory Fulton was listed as emergency contact number 2 after Kate and Tom. Her fingers trembled as she typed his name into public court records. He had no criminal record, but he did have connections to 2 shuttered private youth shelters, both linked to faith-based transitional housing for at-risk children, one of which folded under accusations of abuse and mismanagement in 2009. It wasn't a stretch anymore. It was a map. Gregory Fulton was part of the network that had taken Liam, and possibly others. Anna found an affidavit buried in a federal investigation from over a decade ago. It detailed a raid on an unlicensed shelter. Among the children recovered was an unnamed boy, estimated age 10, found wandering outside a nearby property. He was dazed, dehydrated, and had no ID. The photo wasn't public, but the intake number matched Ethan's adoption case. He had escaped. He hadn't been rescued. He had run. Ben was the one who told their parents. He sat them down at the dining room table, the same one that once held birthday cakes and back-to-school folders, and slid the manila folder across Tom. Kate opened it. Inside, court filings, printouts, and Gregory Fulton's face. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she stared at the photo, lips trembling. That can't be right. Ben's voice was cold. He was in on it. He knew where Liam was. For years. Tom stood suddenly, fists clenched at his sides. Greg was our friend. He coached Liam's team. He also worked with the shelters. Anna said, quietly. He was the one who signed Liam in, under a false name. Then he vanished before the investigation began. Changed jobs. Moved states. Kate's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes brimmed. He brought us dinners. He prayed with us. He held my hand the day they called off the search. He was buying time, Ben said, keeping us from looking too close. The room fractured into shouts, then silence. Tom collapsed into a chair, staring at nothing. Kate sobbed into her palms. And Ethan, standing in the doorway, having heard everything, turned and walked outside without a word. Later that night, Anna found him at the old soccer field. He was sitting on the rusted bleachers, the cold wind cutting through his jacket. She sat beside him, silent for a while. They trusted him, Ethan said finally. I trusted him. Anna didn't answer. There were no right words. He took me, he continued. He knew me, and he still took me. How do you come back from that? You don't, Anna said. But you keep going. Because your story didn't end there. Ethan stared out at the field, at the ghost of a boy running home, and whispered, no, it didn't. The arrest came quietly, like so many terrible things do. Gregory Fulton was pulled from his suburban home, just outside Albany, hands cuffed behind his back while his wife watched in confused silence. The warrant named him as a key accomplice in a defunct child trafficking ring posing as a rescue initiative. The charges were staggering: unlawful detainment, conspiracy, falsifying records, and kidnapping a minor, Liam Harper. The story hit headlines within hours. The Harper name was back on every screen in America. Before the trial, the prosecution allowed a victim confrontation in a controlled setting, a sterile meeting room flanked by 2 officers and a legal advocate. Ethan, or Liam, depending on who was speaking, stood across the table from the man he'd once called Coach Greg. Fulton looked older now. His once sharp features had dulled, gray creeping up his temples. But his eyes, they were exactly the same. Watchful, calculating. Liam, he said with false warmth, you've grown up so well. Stop. Ethan's voice was low, but razor sharp. You don't get to talk to me. Not like that. Greg's expression faltered. You don't understand. I was 10. Ethan cut in. I trusted you. You told me to get in the car. You told me we were going home. Silence. You didn't rescue me. You erased me. The officers ended the session after that. There was no need for more. The courtroom was packed for opening statements. Ethan sat behind the prosecution, flanked by Kate and Ben. Tom stayed outside, unable to stomach the confrontation. The district attorney built a case brick by brick, tracing money, false records, and Greg Fulton's connections to shuttered shelters and forged documentation. Witnesses from other families were called. Names once buried under sealed files were now spoken aloud. And then came Ethan's testimony. He stepped up to the stand, heart thudding so loud he could hear it in his throat. The oath felt surreal. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But how do you tell the truth when it's made of fog and fractures? I don't remember everything, he began. But I remember fear. I remember being told I couldn't leave. I remember being told my family wasn't looking for me. He paused. And I remember Coach Greg, the man who used to come to our house, who brought pizza on game days, who told me my mom had sent him to pick me up that day. He lied, and I disappeared. The courtroom was dead silent. I lived 15 years thinking I didn't matter, that I was no one. But I had a name. I had a family, and he took that from me. The trial dragged on for weeks. Gregory Fulton's defense team fought hard, painting him as misled, a pawn in a larger operation. But the jury was unmoved. Ethan stopped attending after the 3rd week. The courtroom drained him, reopened wounds that hadn't yet scabbed over. He wasn't sure justice looked like this. Cold, procedural, sanitized. He sat alone one evening, staring at the legal updates in his inbox, and whispered, what if this doesn't change anything? Anna, across from him, met his eyes. "It won't erase the past," she said. "Justice isn't about healing. It's about naming the harm, so it can't hide anymore." Later that night, Ethan scrolled through the emails and articles, then closed his laptop and looked out the window at the street below. It was quiet, normal, but he didn't feel normal. "Do you think I'll ever feel like me?" he asked. Anna didn't offer easy answers. Instead, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I think," she said, "you're still becoming who that is."